When I was discharged from the hospital, I found my clothes folded in black garbage bags. My son said to me, "We're going to rent out your room, Mom." I handed him the lease termination papers. Jeffrey didn't even look me in the eyes as he took the document from my trembling hands. 2 weeks in the hospital for pneumonia, and this was my welcome home. My entire life reduced to a few plastic bags, as if 65 years of existence could be so easily discarded. "It's just temporary, Mom," he said, his attention already diverted to his phone. "We need the extra income, and you're barely here anyway." Barely here? I'd been living with Jeffrey and his wife Vanessa for 8 months, ever since I could no longer afford my own place after retirement. The small bedroom had been my only private space, the only corner of the world that still felt like mine. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice weaker than I intended. Vanessa appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. "We thought you could stay with Carol for a while," she said, referring to my sister who lived 2 states away. "Or there's always those senior apartments downtown." Senior apartments. The way she said it made it sound like a perfectly reasonable solution, as if I could simply walk in today and have a place to live tomorrow. As if my teacher's pension would stretch to cover rent in this overpriced city. I looked at my son, my only child. The boy I had raised alone after his father's heart attack took him from us when Jeffrey was just 12. The child I'd worked 2 jobs for, sometimes going without meals so he could have the baseball cleats he wanted or the computer he needed for school. "I'll figure something out," I said finally, because what else could I say? Jeffrey nodded, relief washing over his face. "Great. We already have someone interested in the room. They're coming to see it tomorrow." Tomorrow? My room wasn't even cold yet. I shuffled to the kitchen, my body still weak from the hospital stay, and sat heavily at the table. The same table where I'd helped Jeffrey with his homework for years. Where I'd written countless checks for his college tuition, draining my savings because I believed in his future. "Do you need help with those bags?" Vanessa asked, not moving an inch to actually offer assistance. "No, thank you," I replied, the politeness ingrained from decades of being a middle school English teacher. "I just need a minute to think." Think about what? Where to go? How my own son could so easily displace me? How little I seemed to matter in this equation. As I sat there, memories flooded back. Jeffrey's graduation day, how proud I'd been watching him accept his diploma. The day he married Vanessa, both of them glowing with promise. The countless birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days when I thought we were building something unbreakable. What a fool I'd been. Later that night, after Jeffrey and Vanessa had gone to bed, I sat on the edge of what had been my bed, surrounded by black garbage bags. My clothes, my books, the few mementos I'd kept. All packed away as if in preparation for my funeral rather than a move. I pulled out my phone and looked at my meager bank balance. $642. My next pension check wouldn't come for 2 weeks. I scrolled through my contacts, pride battling desperation as I considered who I could call. There was a soft knock at the door. I hastily wiped away my tears before saying, "Come in." It was Jeffrey, looking uncomfortable in his pajamas. For a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mom, He started, then stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. "We just think this is best for everyone." "Best for who, Jeffrey?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Vanessa found some extended stay hotels that might work until you figure things out. They're not too expensive." Not too expensive for whom? I wanted to ask, but I just nodded, suddenly too tired to fight. "Get some sleep, Mom. Things will look better in the morning." But as the door closed behind him, I knew things wouldn't look better. Because the truth was crystal clear in the harsh light of this betrayal. I had become inconvenient, disposable, a burden to be shifted elsewhere. I stared at the black garbage bags surrounding me like mourners at a wake. Tomorrow I would have to find somewhere to go. Tomorrow I would have to start over at 65. Tomorrow I would have to face the reality that the person I loved most in this world had packed away my life as easily as old clothes going to charity. And sitting there in the darkness, I made a silent promise to myself. This would not be the end of my story. I found Martha by accident, or perhaps fate finally decided to throw me a scrap of kindness. After 3 days in a rundown motel that reeked of cigarettes and despair, my meager savings rapidly dwindling, I spotted a room for rent sign in the window of a faded yellow house just 6 blocks from Jeffrey's home. The proximity was both a comfort and a knife twist, close enough to maintain the illusion that my son might suddenly remember his conscience, yet far enough that I wouldn't accidentally cross paths with him and Vanessa on the street. The room itself was small, barely fitting a twin bed and a dresser, but it was clean, and the window overlooked a tiny garden where an elderly tabby cat sunned itself on a bench. The landlady, Martha, was 72, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that had clearly seen their share of hardship. "It's not much," she said, showing me the cramped space, "but it's quiet and you have your own bathroom down the hall. Kitchen privileges included." "It's perfect," I said, though perfect was hardly the word for this latest humiliation. Perfect would have been my own home, my own things, my own life intact. Perfect would have been a son who honored the sacrifices I'd made. Martha didn't ask many questions when I paid the first month's rent in cash, leaving me with just enough for my heart medication and the bare essentials. She simply handed me a key and said, "Dinner's at 6 if you want to join me. Nothing fancy, but there's always enough." That first night after unpacking my few possessions, amazing how quickly a life can be reduced to 2 black garbage bags. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and tried to calculate how long I could survive. My teacher's pension would start arriving next week, but after rent, medications, and the minimum payments on the credit card I'd maxed out helping Jeffrey through his final year of college, there wouldn't be much left. I scrolled through my phone, stopping at Jeffrey's number. 3 days, and he hadn't called once to check if his mother was sleeping on the street. "Don't call him," Martha said from the doorway, making me jump. She stood there with a cup of tea, which she extended toward me. "Sorry to intrude, but that look on your face, I've seen it before. In my own mirror." I accepted the tea with trembling hands. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there." She hesitated, then asked, "Children?" "Just one. A son." My voice caught. "He and his wife needed my room." Martha nodded, unsurprised. "My daughter decided I was too much trouble after my hip replacement, moved me to a nursing home, sold my house, and used the money for a cruise. When I got better and wanted to leave, she'd already spent everything." "That's terrible," I said, genuinely shocked despite my own situation. Martha shrugged. "It's a club nobody wants to join, but here we are. Anyway, I managed to get this place with what little I had left. Now I rent rooms to make ends meet." I sipped the tea, the warmth spreading through me. "How do you not hate her? Your daughter." "Who says I don't?" Martha replied with a small, sad smile. "But hate takes energy, and at our age, energy is precious. Better to use it rebuilding." The next morning, I forced myself to establish a routine. I walked to the library, used their computers to search for part-time jobs that might accommodate someone my age. The results were depressing. Not much demand for retired English teachers with arthritic hands and no recent work experience. On my way back, I passed a small cafe where Jeffrey and I used to have Sunday brunch occasionally. Through the window, I saw a familiar figure, Caroline, a former colleague who had taught math at my school. Before I could retreat, she spotted me and waved enthusiastically. "Denise," she called, hurrying outside. "I've been trying to reach you. Your number kept going to voicemail." I'd been ignoring calls, too ashamed to explain my situation. Caroline's smile faded as she took in my appearance. I suddenly realized how I must look. Wearing the same clothes as yesterday, my hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, my face lined with new worries. "Are you okay?" she asked, lowering her voice. "I heard you were in the hospital." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just pneumonia. All better now." She studied me for a moment, unconvinced. "Join me for coffee?" My treat. I wanted to refuse, to protect what remained of my dignity, but the prospect of sitting in a warm cafe instead of my rented room was too tempting. Over coffee, Caroline chatted about school gossip, retirement adventures, her grandchildren. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, grateful she wasn't pressing for details about my life. Then she said, "I ran into Jeffrey at the hardware store last week. He mentioned they're converting your room into some kind of home office space? Said you'd moved out to enjoy your retirement?" The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Home office. So that was the story he was telling. "Something like that," I managed. Caroline leaned forward, her voice gentle. Denise, what's really going on? This isn't like you. And suddenly, sitting across from this woman I'd shared lunch duty with for 15 years, the dam broke. The words poured out: the hospital, the black garbage bags, the rented room, my dwindling finances. By the time I finished, Caroline's expression had shifted from concern to outrage. That ungrateful little... She started, then caught herself. Sorry, but after everything you did for him? Remortgaging your house to pay for his college? Working through your cancer treatment so he could finish his degree? I flinched at the reminder of sacrifices Jeffrey had clearly forgotten. Stay with me, Caroline offered immediately. I have a spare room. You don't have to do this alone. I shook my head, pride still stubbornly intact despite everything. I can't impose. Then let me at least help you figure this out. There are resources, Denise. And you have friends, even if your son is being a complete... She stopped herself again, but I could fill in the blank. As we parted ways, Caroline hugged me fiercely and slipped something into my pocket. Later, I discovered it was $200 in cash with the note. This isn't charity. It's what friends do. That night, as I sat with Martha at her small kitchen table sharing a simple meal of soup and bread, I felt something I hadn't expected, a tiny flicker of possibility. Not hope exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin. Your son call yet? Martha asked bluntly. No, I admitted. But I reconnected with an old friend today. Martha nodded approvingly. Good. New roots. That's where you start. New roots. At 65, I was being forced to start over, to plant myself in foreign soil when I should have been harvesting the fruits of decades of hard work and sacrifice. But as I lay in my narrow bed that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I realized something that sent a chill through me. Jeffrey had taken my room, my home, my security. But only if I allowed it would he take my future too. I never meant to discover Jeffrey's deception. Truth has a way of finding you, even when you're not looking for it. 3 weeks into my new life at Martha's, Caroline insisted on taking me to lunch somewhere nice, to celebrate my upcoming birthday. 66 deserves more than soup and toast, she declared, though I'd have preferred to let the day pass unmarked. What was there to celebrate? Another year of being unwanted? We were seated at a small bistro downtown when Caroline's expression suddenly changed. Don't turn around, she whispered, but of course I immediately did. There, across the restaurant, sat Jeffrey and Vanessa with a young couple I didn't recognize. They were laughing, champagne glasses raised in a toast. Jeffrey looked so carefree, so unburdened, as if he hadn't cast his mother out like yesterday's trash just 3 weeks earlier. We can leave, Caroline offered, already reaching for her purse. No, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I'm not running away from my own son. Throughout the meal, I kept stealing glances at their table. The young couple seemed excited. Jeffrey animated as he showed them something on his phone. I couldn't hear their conversation over the restaurant noise, but their body language spoke of enthusiasm, of plans being made. As we were paying our bill, I excused myself to use the restroom, deliberately taking a path that would lead me past their table. Jeffrey saw me coming and froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. Mom, he said, standing awkwardly. What are you doing here? Having lunch, I replied, my voice calmer than the storm inside me. Hello, Vanessa. My daughter-in-law managed a tight smile. Denise, you look better. Better than what? The last time she saw me, weak from pneumonia, discovering my belongings in garbage bags? An uncomfortable silence fell until Jeffrey cleared his throat. These are our friends, Tyler and Madison. We're so excited about the room. Madison exclaimed, oblivious to the tension. A home office by day and an Airbnb suite by night. It's going to be perfect for extra income. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Airbnb. Not just an office. They were turning my room into a short-term rental. It's such a smart idea, Madison continued enthusiastically. Jeffrey showed us the listing you already created, $125 a night for a premium workspace with luxury overnight accommodations. We're definitely stealing that idea. I looked at Jeffrey, unable to mask my shock. He couldn't meet my eyes. Excuse me, I managed before walking away, no longer headed toward the restroom but straight for the exit. Caroline, seeing my face, threw money on the table and hurried after me. Outside, the spring air felt thin and insufficient. I gulped it down anyway, trying to steady myself. Denise. Caroline touched my arm gently. What happened? They're turning my room into an Airbnb, I said, the words tasting like ash. They threw me out so they could rent my bedroom to strangers. Caroline's outrage was immediate and profane. As she ranted about my ungrateful son, I stood silent, a terrible clarity washing over me. This wasn't about needing extra income as Jeffrey had claimed. This was about profit, about seeing an opportunity in getting rid of me. That evening I sat in Martha's garden, watching the elderly cat chase shadows as twilight descended. Martha brought out tea, taking the seat beside me without speaking. Finally I said, "My son is renting my old room to tourists." Martha nodded, unsurprised. Figured it was something like that. My daughter sold my antique jewelry before she even had me moved into that nursing home. How do we raise children who can do such things? I whispered. That's the wrong question, Martha replied, her voice gentle but firm. The right question is, what are you going to do now that you know? What indeed? I had less than $200 to my name until my next pension check. My options seemed limited to continued quiet suffering. You know, Martha said, breaking into my thoughts. When my daughter took everything, I thought that was the end. But something happens when you hit bottom. You can finally see what's been hiding in the dark corners. I looked at her questioningly. Check your old papers, she advised. Your husband's things. Sometimes we forget what we actually have, because we're too busy worrying about what we've lost. That night I emptied my 2 garbage bags onto the bed, sorting through the hastily packed items. At the bottom of the second bag, I found a folder I hadn't opened in years, paperwork from after Robert's death. My hands trembled as I leafed through insurance documents, his will, the deed to our old house that I'd sold to put Jeffrey through college. And there, tucked between yellowing pages, was an envelope I didn't recognize, addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. Inside was a letter, dated just weeks before his fatal heart attack, and a bank statement from an account I never knew existed. My dearest Denise, the letter began. If you're reading this, I'm gone and you found my surprise. I've been putting a little aside each month in this account. Not much, but it's for you. Only you, for that rainy day we always talked about. Jeffrey will have his college fund, but this is your safety net. Your someday fund. Use it when you need it most, and know that I loved you enough to want to take care of you, even when I couldn't be there. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at the bank statement. It wasn't a fortune, just over $15,000 back then. But it was something Robert had created just for me. Something Jeffrey knew nothing about. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and searched for the bank's website. Did the account even still exist after all these years? And if it did, what might it have grown to with compound interest over nearly 2 decades? As the page loaded, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. The fluttering wings of hope, small but persistent, lifting from the ashes of despair. The account existed. After nearly 20 years of untouched compound interest, Robert's someday fund had grown to just over $42,000. Not enough to buy a home in today's market, but enough to change everything about my current circumstances. I stared at the balance on my laptop screen at the library, afraid to blink in case the numbers disappeared. $42,000. My hands trembled as I printed the account details. Good news? Asked the librarian, an older woman who had become familiar with my daily visits. Very, I managed, folding the paper carefully and tucking it into my purse. Outside, spring sunshine warmed my face as I walked slowly back to Martha's house. For the first time since those black garbage bags appeared, I felt something like power returning to my limbs. I wasn't destitute. I had options. Martha was watering her front garden when I arrived. One look at my face and she set down her watering can. Found something, did you? She asked with a knowing smile. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Well, don't just stand there, she said. Come inside and tell me everything. Over tea at her kitchen table, I showed her the letter and account statement. Martha let out a low whistle. Your husband was a good man, she said, carefully refolding the letter. Planning ahead like that. He always worried about me being taken care of, I said, memories of Robert flooding back, his gentle insistence that I save for retirement, His pride when I earned my master's degree and the accompanying salary increase. He would be so disappointed in Jeffrey. Forget disappointment, Martha snorted. He'd kick that boy's behind from here to Sunday. I laughed, surprised by how good it felt. Yes, he would. So, Martha said, eyeing me over her teacup. What now, Denise? It was the question I'd been asking myself all the way home. What now? The practical answer was clear. Find a small apartment, stretch the money as far as possible, rebuild some semblance of independence. But something deeper stirred within me. A desire not just for security, but for justice. Not revenge exactly, but recognition. I wanted Jeffrey to see what he'd done. First, I said slowly, I need to make sure this money is secure. Then I need a real place to live. Martha nodded approvingly. Just be careful. When children smell money, they get ideas. Her warning echoed in my mind the next morning as I sat across from a financial advisor Caroline had recommended. Miss Patel was younger than my former students but exuded competence as she reviewed my situation. We should move this into a more appropriate investment vehicle, she advised. The current account is actually losing value against inflation. I'll need some of it soon for housing, I explained. We can structure it to keep a portion liquid, she assured me. The important thing is protecting your assets. Your assets. The phrase sounded foreign applied to me. For so long I'd seen myself as poor, dependent, a burden the way Jeffrey clearly saw me. But here was evidence to the contrary. I had assets. Not many, but mine nonetheless. As Miss Patel prepared the paperwork, she asked, Any other family members you'd like to add to the account? Sometimes clients add adult children as contingent beneficiaries. No, I said firmly. Just me. That afternoon, with a financial plan in place, I met with a rental agent. My budget would allow for a modest one-bedroom apartment in a decent area. Nothing luxurious but clean, safe, and mine alone. This one might suit you, the agent said, showing me a listing. Senior-friendly building, utilities included, and within walking distance of shops. The photos showed a small but bright space with a tiny balcony. I could almost picture myself there. A few plants on the windowsill, perhaps a comfortable chair for reading. A home. It's available next month, the agent continued. Shall we go see it? As we drove to the property, my phone rang. Jeffrey. My heart lurched as I declined the call. Seconds later, a text appeared. Mom, need to talk. Paperwork for the house. Call me. Of course. Now he needed something from me. The apartment was better than the photos. Freshly painted walls, new carpet, and large windows that filled the space with light. The kitchen was tiny but functional, the bedroom snug but with ample closet space. The balcony overlooked a small community garden. It's perfect, I told the agent. Great. We'll need first and last month's rent, plus security deposit. That's $3,200 total. I swallowed hard at the figure but nodded. This was what my someday fund was for. As I signed the lease, another text arrived from Jeffrey. Mom, it's important. Please call back. I silenced my phone and focused on the paperwork that would secure my new home. That evening, I returned to Martha's house with a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. Independence was within reach. Not the retirement I'd once envisioned, but something precious nonetheless. Martha celebrated with me, opening a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. To new beginnings, she toasted. My phone rang again, Jeffrey, for the third time. With a sigh, I finally answered. Mom, thank God, he said, sounding stressed. I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Look, I need you to sign some paperwork for the house. The refinance won't go through without your signature since your name is still on the deed. I nearly dropped the phone. My name was still on the deed? The house I'd been living in, the home I thought belonged solely to Jeffrey and Vanessa. I was still a legal owner? What refinance? I asked, trying to keep my tone level. For the renovations, he explained impatiently. For the Airbnb conversion. The contractor needs a deposit by Friday. The audacity was breathtaking. He had thrown me out, and now wanted me to sign papers so he could finance the very renovations that would turn my former bedroom into a profit center. I see, I said quietly. When do you need this signed? Can you come by tomorrow? The notary will be there at 10. I thought of my new apartment, of Robert's letter, of black garbage bags on a bed. I'll be there, I promised. After hanging up, I turned to find Martha watching me, concern evident in her eyes. You're not just going to sign, are you? She asked. I smiled, a plan already forming. Oh, I'll be there tomorrow. But not to sign away anything else. For the first time since those garbage bags appeared, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, no longer haunted by uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, yes, but also perhaps a reckoning long overdue. The morning of my appointment with Jeffrey, I dressed carefully in clothes Caroline had insisted on buying me. An investment in your dignity, she'd called it. A navy pantsuit that made me look put together, professional. Not like a homeless mother in borrowed clothes. Martha watched me prepare, approval in her eyes. You look like you're going to battle. In a way I am, I replied, checking my purse one last time. Inside was a folder containing copies of the deed showing my name still listed as co-owner, printouts confirming my new apartment lease, and most importantly, a letter from the attorney Caroline had connected me with outlining my legal options. Remember, Martha said as I headed for the door, you have the power now. Not him. I nodded, though my heartbeat betrayed my nervousness. Standing up to Jeffrey went against decades of maternal instinct. But as I walked the familiar 6 blocks to what had once been my home, I reminded myself that Jeffrey had rewritten the rules when he packed my life into garbage bags. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same neatly trimmed hedges I used to maintain. Same porch swing where I'd spent countless evenings grading papers. But it no longer felt like home. That sense had evaporated the moment I saw those black plastic bags. I rang the doorbell, an absurd formality for a place where I'd lived until recently. Vanessa opened the door, her surprise at my appearance poorly concealed. Denise, she said, stepping back. You look different. Is Jeffrey ready? I asked, ignoring her comment. In the kitchen with the notary, she replied, leading me through the living room. I paused as we passed the hallway leading to my former bedroom. The door was open, revealing walls now stripped of wallpaper, the hardwood floors covered with drop cloths. My sanctuary being dismantled, repackaged for strangers. Jeffrey looked up when I entered the kitchen, relief washing over his face. Mom, great. This is Gerald from the bank. He has the papers ready. Gerald, a balding man with rectangular glasses, offered a perfunctory smile. Mrs. Turner, good to meet you. As Mr. Turner explained, we just need your signature on the refinancing documents since you're still listed on the deed. I understand, I said, taking the seat across from him. But before we begin, I'd like to discuss some things with my son. Privately, if you don't mind. Gerald glanced at Jeffrey, who nodded reluctantly. Take your time. I'll wait in the car. Vanessa mumbled something about checking emails and disappeared upstairs, leaving Jeffrey and me alone in the kitchen. You look good, Mom, he offered, clearly trying to soften me up. How's the new place working out? Which new place? I asked calmly. The motel where I spent my first nights after you packed my belongings in garbage bags? Or Martha's boarding house where I've been renting a room smaller than your walk-in closet? His face flushed. Mom, we've been over this. We needed extra income. I finished for him. Yes, that's what you said. But it wasn't the whole truth, was it? You're not just creating a home office. You're establishing an Airbnb rental. He shifted uncomfortably. How did you? I ran into you and your friends at the bistro, I said. Madison was quite enthusiastic about your plans. Jeffrey sighed, running a hand through his hair. A gesture so like his father that it momentarily disarmed me. Look, it's just smart business. The location is perfect for short-term rentals, and we can charge premium rates. While your mother lives in a boarding house, I said quietly. You could have stayed with Aunt Carol, he countered, as if that justified everything. 2 states away from the life I built here? From my doctors, my friends, my community. He had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but quickly rallied. Mom, what do you want? We don't have time for this. The notary is waiting. I opened my purse and carefully extracted the folder. I'm not signing the refinancing documents, Jeffrey. His face darkened. What? Mom, be reasonable. We need this to move forward with the renovations. I'm being perfectly reasonable, I replied, sliding the deed copy across the table. This house is still half mine. I paid for it with the money from selling the home your father and I bought together. I contributed to the mortgage payments for years. And I never signed anything transferring my ownership to you. He stared at the document, color draining from his face. But this was always meant to be our house. Vanessa and mine. Was it? Or was it meant to be a home where your aging mother would always have a place to live? Because that's what I believed when I put my retirement savings into the down payment. Mom, please, he said, his voice taking on the wheedling tone he'd used as a teenager when he wanted money for something. This renovation means everything to our financial future. If you block this— I'm not blocking anything, I interrupted. I'm proposing a fair resolution. I slid a second document across the table, the letter from the attorney. You have two options, I explained as he skimmed the contents with growing dismay. Either buy out my half of the house at fair market value, or I'll force a sale and we'll split the proceeds. You can't be serious, he whispered, but the certainty in my eyes told him I was. The attorney estimated my share at approximately $175,000 based on current market values. I continued. Once I receive that amount, I'll sign whatever documents you need for your Airbnb dreams. We don't have that kind of money, he protested. Then perhaps you should consider a larger refinance, I suggested. One that includes paying off your debt to me. Debt? His voice rose incredulously. You're my mother. That's what mothers do. They help their children. Yes, Jeffrey, I said, my voice finally breaking. Mothers help their children. They don't expect to be discarded in garbage bags when they become inconvenient. A heavy silence fell between us, punctuated only by the ticking of the kitchen clock, the same clock I'd hung on that wall 15 years earlier. I've secured an apartment, I said finally. I'm moving in next month. In the meantime, I expect you to contact your bank about modifying the refinance to include my buyout. My attorney will be in touch to formalize the agreement. I stood up, gathering my belongings. Jeffrey remained seated, shock still evident on his face. Mom, he said as I reached the door. Where did you get an attorney? How are you affording an apartment? I thought of Robert's letter, of his foresight and love reaching across time to protect me when my own son wouldn't. Let's just say I had a guardian angel, I replied softly. Goodbye, Jeffrey. Tell Gerald I won't be signing today. As I walked down the driveway, past the confused notary sitting in his car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The power had shifted. For the first time since those black garbage bags appeared, I was no longer a victim of circumstances but the architect of my own future. 6 weeks later, I stood in the center of my new apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes rather than garbage bags. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the small space I could finally call my own again. The buyout had been finalized the previous week. $180,000, slightly more than my attorney's initial estimate thanks to a recent sale in Jeffrey's neighborhood. The money now sat safely in investments Ms. Patel had carefully selected, structured to provide me with monthly income while preserving the principal. Need help with that? Martha asked, appearing in the doorway with a box labeled kitchen. She had insisted on helping me move, despite my protests about her hip. I've been carrying my own burdens for decades, she'd said. I can handle a few dishes. Just set it on the counter, I told her. Caroline should be here with lunch soon. As if summoned by her name, Caroline appeared, balancing a stack of pizza boxes. Housewarming feast has arrived. We gathered around my new dining table, a second-hand find Martha had helped restore, and shared the first meal in my new home. The conversation flowed easily, three women connected by life's unexpected turns. Have you heard from Jeffrey since the closing? Caroline eventually asked, her tone cautious. I shook my head. Not a word. After our confrontation, communication had been handled entirely through attorneys. Jeffrey had attempted to negotiate a lower buyout, claiming financial hardship, but my lawyer held firm. Eventually, faced with the alternative of a forced sale, he'd secured a larger mortgage to pay me what was rightfully mine. His loss, Martha declared, reaching for another slice of pizza. You've got a new family now. The sentiment warmed me more than I could express. Martha was right, these women had become more than friends. They were the support system I never expected to find at 66. After lunch, as we unpacked kitchen supplies, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with the local area code. Hello. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Turner? A young woman's voice asked. This is Amber Jackson from Lakeside Elementary. I'm calling about the reading tutor position you applied for. My heart skipped. I'd submitted an application 2 weeks earlier, hoping to put my teaching experience to use in retirement. Just a few hours a week, but it would be a connection to the profession I'd loved for over 40 years. Yes, this is Denise Turner, I confirmed. We'd love to have you join our program, Amber continued brightly. Your experience is exactly what we're looking for. Could you start next Monday? As I accepted the position, Caroline and Martha exchanged smiles, having overheard enough to understand the good news. Looks like you'll need some new school supplies, Caroline teased after I hung up. Students again, I marveled. I never thought I'd have that opportunity at my age. The world has a funny way of opening new doors, Martha observed, especially when someone else slams one in your face. Later that evening, after my friends had left, I stood on my small balcony watching the sunset. 6 months ago, I'd been in a hospital bed, unaware that my life was about to implode. Now I was starting over with unexpected resources, financial security, a home of my own, meaningful work on the horizon, and friends who had become family. The doorbell interrupted my reflections. Puzzled, I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole to see Jeffrey shifting nervously in the hallway. For a moment I considered not answering. What was left to say? But curiosity won out, and I opened the door. Mom, he said, looking uncomfortable in his business casual attire. Nice place. Thank you, I replied, not inviting him in. How did you find me? Caroline, he admitted. I called her because I was concerned. Now after all this time, what do you need, Jeffrey? I asked directly. He flinched at my tone. Can I come in? Just for a minute. Reluctantly I stepped aside. He entered cautiously, surveying the apartment with surprise evident in his expression. Perhaps he'd expected something shabby, something that would reinforce his narrative of the needy mother. It's small, he commented, but nice. It suits me perfectly, I said. Why are you here? He sank onto the edge of my sofa, suddenly looking very young and uncertain. The Airbnb isn't working out. The market's saturated, and the renovation costs were higher than expected. Vanessa's upset. We're fighting all the time about money. I nodded, waiting for him to continue, sensing there was more. And I've been thinking about everything, he went on, not meeting my eyes. About how we treated you. About Dad. Your father. I asked, surprised by this turn. I found his letter, Jeffrey confessed, when we were clearing out some storage boxes in the attic. The copy he kept of what he wrote to you about that account. He wanted to make sure you were always taken care of, and instead His voice broke, and for a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who had once held my hand at his father's funeral, confused and heartbroken by a loss too big to comprehend. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered. I was wrong. We were wrong. Part of me wanted to rush to him, to comfort him as I had so many times throughout his life. But another part, the part that had been discarded in garbage bags, held me back. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully, but I'm not sure what you want from me now. He looked up, eyes damp. I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe? A chance to try again. Forgiveness isn't a light switch, Jeffrey. It's a process. And trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. I understand, he said, though I wasn't sure he did. Could we maybe start with dinner sometime? You could meet your granddaughter's new teacher. She's in 1st grade now. My granddaughter. In all this chaos, I'd almost forgotten little Emma, collateral damage in a war between adults. I'd like that, I said softly. Emma shouldn't lose her grandmother because of our issues. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. As he stood to leave, he paused by the small side table where I'd placed a photo of Robert and me on our 20th anniversary. You know, Jeffrey said, Dad would be proud of you for standing up for yourself, even against me. After he left, I returned to the balcony, watching as his car pulled away from the curb. The sun had fully set now, streetlights illuminating the quiet neighborhood. Would reconciliation with Jeffrey be possible? I wasn't sure. The wounds were still fresh, the trust deeply damaged. But perhaps like this apartment, it was something that could be built slowly, one careful piece at a time. For now, though, I had created something precious. A life that was entirely my own. A life built from the ruins of betrayal. Yes, but stronger for having weathered the storm. Tomorrow, I would begin setting up my tutoring materials. The day after, Martha and I had plans to visit a nursery for balcony plants. Next week, Caroline was introducing me to her book club. Small things, ordinary things. The kind of things that, woven together, create a life of dignity and purpose. As I closed the balcony door and turned to face my new home, the space that was mine alone, earned through painful growth and unexpected strength, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with Jeffrey's apology and everything to do with my own journey. Those black garbage bags had been meant as an ending. Instead, they had become the beginning of a story I never expected to write. The story of how at 66, I discovered that it's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to find your voice. And it's never too late to realize that the empty room wasn't the space I had lost, but the possibility waiting to be filled with whatever I chose to create.